One question I see a lot is about how much it costs to self publish versus traditionally publish a book. Now, the standard advice, the best advice, is that as the author, when you traditionally publish, you pay nothing. Money flows to you. If someone is presenting themselves as a traditional publisher and asking for money, run. That said, I did spend some money in the traditional publishing process. So I'm going to go over that today. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm MK Williams. I'm an author. I also publish under the pen names Mary Kate Williams and Kate Williams. I love sharing my insights about all things books and publishing with you. Before I get into the details of today's topic, don't forget to hit subscribe. You'll be notified every week as I put out new videos about publishing, making a career being an author, and now being a mompreneur. So this video is for all the authors who want to be traditionally published or are thinking of switching to that route. I will preface all of this with a repeated disclaimer that as the author, you do not pay the publisher in traditional publishing. So, where do I spend my money then? I'm going to break this down by each phase. So, in the querying phase. Now, querying is when an author will take their manuscript and write a pitch and send it to agents seeking representation for their book. Now, again, you can spend no money here. Many authors spend no money in this phase. I could have done this without spending any money. I just think it would have taken me much longer to get signed. Now, how much did I spend to get an agent? Well, the first thing I did was I signed up for the Query Tracker Pro subscription. It was $25 for a full year. I could have used the free version of Query Tracker. There is a fantastic free option, but I wanted more data because my strategy was to first find agents that I wanted to query, but then I queried them in order of who responded the fastest so I could get data on, is this query working? I have a whole video series on querying, how I used Query Tracker, how I landed my agent, all of that. You can check that out. Now, I would not have been able to see all the data I wanted with the free version. That said, $25 for a year of access to Pro is a ridiculously good deal. I have no affiliate relationship with Query Tracker. I just love them and what they do for authors. So I think that $25 was well spent. And I really took the time to learn the system to make use of it. Like if I'm spending the money, even if it's just $25 for a year subscription, like I want to make sure I'm squeezing every ounce of value out of it. And I think I definitely did because I got signed within 3 months. The second thing I spent money on was a query coach. I spent $475. That's a lot of money. So I am a super frugal person. And so that's why whenever I report to you guys that I've spent money on something, you'll usually see me like, just so you know, I spent money. But I was also at a point where I was hitting my head up against a wall. So I'm now assuming her rates have gone up since I worked with her in 2023, but I did work with a query coach. I worked with Alyssa. I've had her on the channel before. I've been on her channel. That's how we met. And then when I was needing a coach, I was like, I should ask Alyssa for help. So she has fantastic information. I watched a bunch of her videos before I started to query. So I trusted her advice and her style. So I will say, I obviously got signed with an agent. So clearly, I think her services worked for me. But how did I end up spending the money on a query coach? So I had a query letter and I was happy with it. I had worked with critique partners and other authors and kind of like refining it and doing the best I could. I knew something with the query was working, right? I had a full request within 3 days. I was getting skipped. I could see that in Query Tracker Pro. I could see that my query was being skipped. So the agent was coming back to it, right? They were like, no, no, no. Maybe I'll come back to it. No, no, no. And then when they would come back to me, I would usually then get a pass. And so I wanted to figure out what was going on. So I got a second full request after I started working with Alyssa. I realized like something wasn't right and something wasn't working, and it was something I couldn't see. And obviously, any of my critique partners couldn't see. And so I was discussing the lack of progress with my husband. And he said, like, no BS, what would it take? And so at this point, my query has been reviewed and tweaked. I was out of ideas for how to improve it. And short of going to pitch events and trying to like network and negotiate, which could take years, I thought like, okay, well, I could work with Query Coach. I knew Alyssa offered these services. I heard her mention it in her videos and things like that. And so I felt like I could trust her with like going and being like, hey, like, Could you help me? And so we agreed that we would invest in this avenue. And then if I still didn't get signed, we could say we did everything we could. So I hired Alyssa to review my query packet. So that was the query letter, the synopsis, and the first 50 pages, 15 pages. She did a lot of work. So she did send back edits and it was so much better. And when somebody says like, "Oh, your words but better," like it really was my words but more concise, tighter. It was a lot better. She gave me some pointers for like the maximum length my query letter should be, how to really firm it up, how to make best use of my comps. So it was very, very helpful. And so while I was waiting for her edits, I'm still making plans for like, who am I going to query as soon as I get her edits back? And so Kristina Perez with Perez Literary was like number one on my list. I was like, okay, as soon as I get because I'm not querying while I'm waiting for these edits, right? Like I'm like, well, I know something's not working, so I'm going to wait till I have this revision back. And that was about a month that I took off there in that like mid-February, mid-March range. And so as soon as I got the packet back from Alyssa, it was all edited, good to go. I queried Kristina within 48 hours. She requested the full, and a few weeks later, she asked for a call. So I will say that was money well spent to kind of get the peace of mind that the story was good. It just needed a little bit of tweaking. The query was good. It just needed to be tighter. And so that gave me the confidence, but also I think that those revisions really helped it to stand out. So I spent money there and it was worth it. So all in between Query Tracker Pro for $25 and Alyssa's coaching for $475, I spent $500 on the querying stage. This was all optional. And for you as a first-time author starting out, if you think, okay, I could spend $25 on Query Tracker Pro, but I could not for the coaching, like that is fine. There are lots of groups you can find with critique partners, with authors who are out there who would probably be happy to be like, yeah, I'll look over your query letter. Like, let me help you. The thing is, like, they just know their experience. So, like, get a lot of feedback. Don't just change it based on one person. Get a lot of feedback, and try to finesse it from there. This was all optional. I just wanted to get things done faster. So I'm glad I invested the money there. The next phase in traditional publishing was getting a deal. Now, I spent nothing in the editing and submission phase, maybe a couple coffees while I was like editing on a Saturday morning in a coffee shop, but I probably would have spent the money anyway, so I'm not going to count that. Okay, after getting the deal. Now, you notice nothing about getting the deal, nothing about signing the contract required me to spend any money. If the publisher had said, you need to pay money for me to publish, not going to work. And that is why having a credible agent on your side is good. Again, my agent doesn't ask for any money up front. She makes money when I make money. She makes a percentage of the contract that was ironed out in our agreement. The publisher pays for the rights to publish because they are hoping to obviously make more than that amount on the book. So getting the deal, waiting on submission, nothing spent except for some coffees and maybe some chocolate because it was stressful. Okay. After the deal, now the money that I spent here was kind of required, but I'll get to it. Okay, so I had the deal for Janice Heifer. So it took a while to get the contract. So after I signed the contract that had all the details of how much I would be paid, I'd got two requests that were going to cost me money. So number one was the tax forms. So for the French translation, I needed to pay $85 to get a 6166 certificate of residency from the IRS so I could get paid with the correct tax withholdings. So reduce that from my earnings, that's fine. And then I had to pay another $3 to mail the forms to France. Now I could have paid $47 to expedite and have tracking, but after paying $85 to the IRS, I was not about to do that. So for some reason, this specific form is expensive. It's very onerous. I did pay out of pocket because at this point I had not been paid by the publisher yet, but I knew that money was coming. Like this was the chicken that had to come before the egg. They couldn't pay me until I submitted the form. And the money I paid was to the IRS, the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. I got my money. I have a whole video on it. It was stressful. It was not fun. I also received the form in the very brief 2-week window between massive hurricanes. So I'm glad I received it then and it didn't get flooded and ruined, but it was a tough time. And it was tax forms and not fun. Okay. And then the next request that I got from my French publisher, Hugo, was they asked for headshots. Now I had a headshot that my husband took on his iPhone It looked great, but it wasn't like a professional headshot. So I did spend $300 on my headshots. So I planned to get headshots done once I had a deal and like invest that money. But this was all taking a while, again, for that expensive tax form. So I did pay out of pocket for my headshots, but I knew the money would be on the way once I sent the tax form. That took forever to get and all the things. So I paid $385 in that phase. But again, those were things that I paid to the IRS and then to my photographer for the items that were requested. So again, optional to a certain extent. Like if I didn't want to be paid, I guess I wouldn't have gotten the tax form. And if I just wanted to send like an amateur photo, I could have done that. But I had in my mind that I wanted to get that done. Oh no, it's 387 because I had an extra $3 to mail the forms. Okay. So as you can see, there was money spent. Now for fake out make out, which we are lovingly calling FOMO, by the way, I haven't paid a dime. I have not spent any money. Again, I already had my agent, so I didn't have to query and spend any money there on Query Tracker Pro. I didn't have to spend anything when we were on submission. I haven't been asked for anything yet. I did ask if I have to do another IRS form because the publisher is based in the UK. So we'll see if I have to do that again. Really hope I don't. Um, yeah, I think at this point, the $85, I'm like, okay, like CapEx, whatever. But if I have to do that form again, I'm gonna cry. So yeah, so I don't have any expenses to date for FOMO. I'm guessing at some point, like if we do a launch party with a local bookstore, if I get like bookmarks or something like that, I will have expenses. I'll probably do a separate video on that. But again, like we have a deal memo in place, which is like a mini contract before the contract, and no one's asked me to pay a dime. No one's asked me to pay a dime. So this is the part where you get, oh, traditional publishing doesn't cost you anything because like nobody's asked me to pay for anything. I already have my headshots from last time. So yeah, this has been nice. This has been no extra money to pay out. So it's really good. Okay. What questions do you have about the traditional publishing process? I'm going to keep doing videos along the way. So if there's anything specific you want to know about, please let me know in the comments below. I genuinely mind those comments for ideas for my next video. If you found this information helpful, informative, you want to commiserate with me on having to do those tax forms again, please give this video a thumbs up, hit subscribe, or hit that shiny thank you button. That tells YouTube you get value from this information and they can get it in front of other authors like us. Now you can get back to writing your book.